a lecturer at Laidlaw College in Auckland, where he teaches theology and education. His Master of Theology, completed in 2022, explores current faith and spirituality trends. Sam's passionate about the intersection of theology and pedagogy, epistemology and culture, and is excited to contribute to Christian Education National Network in this new chapter. I'm going to say it, we love having you across the ditch in Australia as part of our network. Sam is far funnier than I am, so I'm going to now leave him to present to you. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for coming out on is it Wednesday evening or is it Tuesday evening? Tuesday. All right. Yeah. It's obviously everyone's very busy and tired and works jobs and all that kind of stuff, so it's really nice that you can be out here and spending the evening with some random guy from New Zealand. So thank you for coming out. I think the whole point of this evening is to have a really decent conversation about the internet. And what I've really found is that because the internet is ubiquitous, where it's everywhere, we kind of think we know everything about it as we go, but really want to bring things home today. It's really just the ways that it's actually formed us and how the culture of the internet has bled into regular culture and what it's done to us. So it's really a chance to pause, think, bring some things to your attention. You'll probably find a lot of the time I'm telling you things you already know, but just putting them in a different frame. Some of you not so much. Others you'll feel like I'm talking literally about you. Others you'll never have heard some of the things that I'm talking about. So it'll be, I think, an interesting conversation leading to what are some of the priorities that we might have in church ministry and in Christian schools and just Christian institutions in general. So yes, my background is mainly theology and education, but I've done a little bit of church work throughout the years as well. So trying to have that conversation there. So hope that sounds all right. We're going to do a pretty rapid fire whistle stop tour through a whole lot of ideas, and then hopefully have some time at the end to talk. My sense is probably the people in this room don't really get in the same room that often. Would that be fair? Yeah, I haven't actually asked that question of anyone, but yeah. So part of the goal of this kind of event is being able to have these people talking in a room together and sort of catching each other up on what's going on, what they think. So I want to leave a little bit of room for that to come as well. But just to say, I'm not an expert on any of these things. I'm just interested and background in theology, but I am interested in education. I've tried to keep reading about that stuff. So just to bring you a few things about that. So hope that sounds okay. This is really just a conversation starter. And I like how no one is sat in the front row. There is a fence between us. It's good. Holy of holies. So yeah, I've been in Australia now for 6 months. Just moved over from New Zealand. I've been living in Sydney, and a lot of people ask me, why did you move to Australia? And the simple answer is, it's probably not a surprise, but New Zealand's quite boring. And so there's not a lot going on. So I wanted to show you a couple of things in that vein, just to show you what doesn't happen in New Zealand. So here are a couple of examples of front page news in New Zealand over the last year or so. Front page news, New Zealand Herald. Here you go. Not going to work. I'll just list that. We've got the Daily Mail. This is from the Women's World Cup. Spain leave their World Cup base in New Zealand after claiming it was too boring. The town's mayor then invited them on a night out. So this is during the FIFA Women's World Cup last year. Now in New Zealand we have Marmite, you have Vegemite, and so about sometime at the beginning of last year we ran out of Marmite and it became front page news because of course it does because it's New Zealand. And literally you had newspapers calling it Marmageddon. Yeah, this is the kind of stuff that's embarrassing about New Zealand. But very recently, actually, there was a little clip on the news about something devastating that happened in the nation's capital, where someone stole something that's nothing short of a cultural icon. So here is News Hub's reporting on that theft.
Wellington's famous fountain has been missing a bucket since October, until yesterday.
It's not in its yellow form, it's been slightly altered.
Recovered after it was spotted in a social media post.
We handed it on to the authorities and they saw the light eventually, which I think might have been a blue and red flashing light.
Despite the good news, Wellingtonians are divided over the modification.
Keep it original, I reckon.
You do.
Yep.
Even though that person was naughty, and I'm not condoning it.
And that's what the council is doing.
and we'll be restoring it back to its natural yellow as soon as possible.
News Hub's spoken to someone who says they took the bucket after a night out on the town. They've apologised and say they had every intention of returning it, but they couldn't find the right time and were concerned that if they did bring it back, someone else might nick it. People are being warned to not commit a copycat things.
Go along and have a look, but keep your hands to yourself and just enjoy getting moist.
In your bucket list, Mitchell Alexander, News Hub.
There you go. So that's something that's New Zealand primetime news for you. Again, it's really nice to be in a country where things happen. So I did a bit of research before I was moving over, like what is Australian culture? You know, what kind of things are Australians thinking about? So when I come and do stuff like this, I know what kind of like intellectual level things are, and you know what's on the mind of the average Australian. So I figured the best place to do that would be reality TV, where you can't hide, nothing's edited. And I found this on Love Island.
Like, that thing's giant. And how many times bigger is it than Earth? Like,
In the moon?
yeah,
No bigger.
yeah, it is.
So needless to say, is I'll keep this talk really simple. And so I went on message boards and I was like, what are Australians saying about Kiwis? And I found this, you know, Pavlova, the thing that we kind of fight about as nations. Pavlova serves 12 Australians or 1 or 2 Kiwis. Thank you very much for fat shaming us for across the dish. Anyway, all that to say, it's great to be in Australia. I love the trans-Tasman banter that goes on. I think we're good mates deep down. And so I have loved having this kind of conversation out loud with a few different communities about what's going on right now and how we're being formed in this time and place. And I think especially post-pandemic, there's been a few things that have sped up and left us in a very different place to even 5 years ago. So just trying to pay attention to those sort of changes and what it can mean for us that work in Christian institutions and trying to respond well to those things. So before I get into the actual internet stuff, I thought I'd just show you a few things where I think this really gives us a good idea about how some shifts in thinking are happening in culture. So I'm going to play you a video from the most popular podcast in the world, Joe Rogan. Now, you know, some of you would have heard of him, some of you wouldn't. I think at its peak, Game of Thrones still wasn't getting as many people tuning in as Joe Rogan's podcast. Extremely popular. Interesting, like some things are pretty questionable, but this happened about 2 months ago where he was talking about religion and meaning, and this is what he said. So, you know, when he started his podcast in 2008, he was very, very much atheist, very much anti-God, anti-faith and religion. 2 months ago, this is what Joe Rogan said on his podcast. Again, this is working, so I'll keep resetting it.
But I think as time rolls on, people are going to understand the need to have some sort of divine structure to things, some sort of belief in the sanctity of love and of truth. And a lot of that comes from religion. A lot of people's moral compass and the guidelines that they've used to follow to live a just and righteous life has come from religion. And unfortunately, a lot of very intelligent people, they dismiss all the positive aspects of religion because they think that the stories are mere superstitious fairy tales, that, you know, they have no place in this modern world, and, you know, we're inherently good and your ethics are based on your own moral compass and we all have one. And that's not necessarily true. We need Jesus. I think for real. Like, if he came back now, it'd be great. Like, Jesus, if you're thinking about coming back, bring him. Now's a good time. Pretty soon. Yeah. Now's a good time.
So you go. Yeah. Now that actually isn't that strange at this point. Now, I don't know if people in the room have noticed, but in the public intellectual space, Christianity has become a serious and legitimate intellectual disposition. It's no longer treated the same way it was 15 years ago, say. So in the early 2000s, we had writers like Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Daniel Dennett. They called themselves the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, which is very dramatic and nice. But you had these books like The God Delusion or God is Not Great coming out in the early 2000s, and it was like this new atheism that came out. Very much this science versus religion or faith versus reason thing going on, this polarity happening. And so worldview studies sort of arose during that time to kind of try to address those things, to equip Christians to be able to answer some of these challenges and these questions. That was the vibe, the cultural vibe 15 to 20 years ago. Now, things have really changed, and people are kind of looking back to Christianity in a very different way. You've got people like Jordan Peterson, who's one of our leading public intellectuals, taking Christianity very seriously, not necessarily wanting to embrace it, but at least giving it some legitimacy. We have people like Tom Holland, the podcaster, doing that as well. You have all these different public intellectuals. You have Russell Brand getting baptized. So really the mood in culture isn't one that's against Christianity. It's actually one that's very open to it. But it's more of a cultural Christianity. So it's not a whole lot of people becoming Christians, but a whole lot of people saying, I think we need Christianity to be able to operate. And so I think they're feeling this fragility in the West, that things aren't as solid as they once were. They're feeling the systems that held us together breaking down, the globalization dream breaking down. They're seeing the strengthening of places like China and Russia, and they're looking around thinking, oh, actually, what is going to keep us strong and keep the West the West? Well, looking back, it looks like the one thing that made us what we are is Christianity. And so you get this kind of sentiment, which is like Julian Barnes, like, I don't believe in God, but I miss him. And this is a serious mood that's going on now. And what's kind of underneath all of that is a lot of what post-modernity has brought to us. And I think we've had this narrative for a long time that secular culture is becoming increasingly atheist, and because of that, it's become increasingly expressive individualism, if you want to use those words, like we just follow our own truth. And that's largely true. But what we're beginning to see now, I think, is cracks in that narrative. People are living like that and not liking it very much anymore. And so the mood is like, this sucks. Having no meaning sucks. And young people are not buying it in the same ways that previous generations were. Which is very interesting when you're working with young people, because they're trying to find these bits of solid ground in amongst all the chaos waters. Who can I listen to that can give me some sort of stability amongst all the mess? So I don't know if that is resonating with your experience of working with young people, but this is why they're turning to people like Jordan Peterson. I mean, I've got a friend that calls him his internet daddy, right? Which is a little bit creepy, but actually very telling, because it's someone in a world of chaos who is saying something substantial that I can stand on. Yes. Then you have people like Andrew Tate speaking into this mix, who is this, quite misogynistic, toxic masculinity, dominant, tell women where they're supposed to be, because at least someone's telling me what it means to be a man in a place where manhood is seemingly chaotic and being attacked all the time. So hopefully what you're hearing amongst all of that is the vibe has changed of, yeah, we can all believe what we want, to, I wish we could find something substantial here and something worth living from. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's the turn that's happened post-pandemic. So yes, we still live in a postmodern world of expressing individualism. I don't think it's enough to just say that anymore. I think there are some new moves happening which are kind of bleeding into all of the stuff that we do, whether it be in schools or in churches, and that's very interesting for us to be able to live out of. With me so far? Yeah. Cool, I feel like I'm fire-hosing you, but at least you get your buzz with, right? So all of that is basically saying, I think people are turning to things like Christianity as a moral source, or a source of order, or a civilizational moral order source. We want to look to it to give us sense of stability in a world that's feeling increasingly crumbly. And so with that, we've got to be very careful not just to be like, yeah, everybody come to our institutions because we'll give you order, but to actually hold on to this idea that God is a God of grace, and He's after your heart, and He actually wants to know you and challenge you on certain things because it's a real relationship or something that's alive. And not just something to tell me how the world should be and how I should live my life. So I think that's the challenge for some of our institutions. But I do think it's a way we can kind of surf a little bit and find opportunities within that. So instead of just going further and further into this progressive world, which I think has been the narrative for a little while, that everything's just becoming more progressive, what we're actually finding with young people is that the opposite is true. So as we've been talking about the chaos waters, what's started to get more momentum is actually the other end of things. So this is Daniel Gortz, a sociologist, saying it's actually different forms of neo-reactionary, conservative and identitarian or alt-right movements that have stolen the momentum and the imagination of a generation of the young. So it's not the progressive, It's actually the other side, which is actually the transcript, if you like, and it's actually stolen the momentum. It's I believe the stuff that, I want to hold on to the stuff that maybe people have trouble with, but I feel like I'm onto something. You know what I mean? So to give you an example of this is one of the, probably the harshest examples of a young person who's sort of grabbed onto this. This is a young YouTuber called Soph, who a few years ago rose to prominence on YouTube by basically writing and then narrating these videos in which she showed her point of view, which was neo-Nazi, misogynistic, often quite racist. But she was encouraged to do that because the algorithm loved it. So the algorithm rewarded her because she was saying all this stuff that inflamed people's rhetoric and got a whole bunch of followers. And this is the stuff she's saying. And bear in mind, so this is a 20-minute video that she made once, and I found the 1 minute that I thought this is the least offensive that I could show you. Still had to bleep a whole lot of stuff out. She's hyper-articulate, but also very switched on, but she's using her intellect to buy into this quite twisted way of thinking. So here you go, this is Soph talking about 12 or 13 years old.
For decades now, kids have been getting taught leftist in public schools and none of you bat an eye, but someone put some videos up on YouTube without any pretense and suddenly they're brainwashing people. You could beg me kicking and screaming to stop disseminating the ideas I believe in and it wouldn't make a difference. Not only am I inoculated to that bull, most of Gen Z is too. Millennials grew up with MTV and nowadays they watch Colbert. We, on the other hand, grew up with the internet. So we have no centralized source of information that controls what we think, and we filter out the truth for ourselves. We're not lazy. No one is brainwashing kids. Kids are simply learning from having free access to information, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Wowee! So the whole point is no one's brainwashing kids. We're simply thinking for ourselves and using the internet, and there's nothing you can do about it. The conceit of that maybe she's not aware of is that algorithms definitely are directing your thinking. There is an element of brainwashing going on. You're watching the screen, but the screen's watching you, and it's actually then producing more stuff for you. So these sociologists are actually saying we live in a time now of algorithmically directed human development. Algorithmically directed human development. Now, for most of us in the room who are sort of in the industry of the formation of humans and communities, or humans in communities, that's quite interesting. That what's really forming us isn't these community hubs that we used to have and passing stuff on from generation to generation, which is actually how we build and sustain and maintain cultures. Now it's happening through a screen. That's what we get. We get all the stuff that gets the most hits. That's what disciples our young people is, the internet. And this is what it's incentivizing. So this is the culture passing on tool that's happening within us. And so you're not necessarily up against atheists anymore, like 20 years ago, or like trying to argue with Richard Dawkins. You're now trying to argue with an algorithm, which is way more ubiquitous and crazy and chaotic and personalized. So there's no one voice to challenge this, like a million of them. You with me so far? Cool, all right. So all of that to say is, I think some of these writers are basically saying we're living in a time of a meta crisis or a meaning crisis. And these are thinkers outside of the church who are basically saying, oh, we might be in a bit of a pickle now. So instead of like, let's move away from childish religion and move into us choosing what truth works for us, they're sort of sitting in this, what they've created, the world that we've worked into, and said, actually, this isn't very good. We've got massive challenges globally, and nothing that we've arrived at is doing the job for us anymore. We're in a meta-crisis. And the meta-crisis looks like it's epistemic, which means we have no idea how to know what we know, or we can't decide what's true anymore. It's educational. It's very difficult to make sense of the world for younger people. And it's spiritual. It's very difficult to talk about purpose in a world which says you make it up for yourself. So it's epistemic, very hard to argue for any sort of truth. It's educational, but very hard to help people make sense of all of this. And it's spiritual, very hard to talk about purpose. Now, for most people in the room, that would not be news to you. But what's happening is, in this vacuum of not being able to do those things, we've got all these other voices piling in saying, I'm going to give you a bit of stability. Look at me, I can do it for you. And that's the challenge that we're in, and that's what we want to discuss in this evening. So that's kind of where we're going. And to say it a different way, Zachary Stein says, our children have nowhere else to be educated but within the cultures we create. While it's true that throughout history children have grown up in physically dangerous war zones, they have done so in the context of relatively coherent cultures. What is novel today is a generation growing up in relative physical safety who are nevertheless endangered in the crossfire of a culture of war. So Christian schools and churches are some of the only places left that actually have any sense of a coherent story of what the world actually is. It's extremely important that we do this culture building stuff well. So, this has all been, I guess, led on by the fact that we have access to a whole bunch of information that we've never had in the whole of human history. So, we're going to talk about the internet, but I do want to stop fire hosing you for just a second and maybe get some responses from you guys. So, in your context, what have I talked about so far that you feel is actually resonating with you and what you're doing in your work? What have you seen that's sort of in line with this that was like, anybody notice anything?
Just thinking of the influences, you know, that's the source of wisdom young ones are turning to. They're not turning to mums or dads or teachers, they're turning to the influences whose truth is their own book.
Yeah. That's right. The authorities in here now. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, weird.
Our kids are also sceptical about the education that are actually receiving. We have a daughter's first year's student of secondary education, and she's learning all about it. It's incredibly woke kind of education, and so they're sceptical about the value of education and not actually being taught how to be teachers.
Wow.
Not yet, at least.
First year.
First year.
Well, isn't that interesting? So how old is your daughter, sorry?
19.
19, and so very much part of Gen Z, and is critiquing the academic world that the millennials set up of it's gone very, very progressive.
Yeah.
And now the younger generation will be like, it doesn't make any sense.
No.
But our narrative is like, isn't it going to get more progressive? No, it's not. We're seeing the holes in it. So very, very interesting.
And sadly, she's a very creative young woman, but lately US politics is so fascinating. There is just so much happening on her phone that interests her about US politics, which, like, I just am completely dumbfounded by why that is so interesting, and yet that's what she's so engaged and watching.
Wow. Thanks for tea, Doug.
Anybody else?
Because I just think the role of the algorithm is actually like it's exponentially growing. If you look at anything, because you generally do something else if you're not careful.
Yeah.
And so you can be governed by not only what's there, but driven to spend more time on your life. And always time that should be devoted to substance on it.
Yes. Yeah. And you're just trained to be passive all the time. Yeah.
There seems to be a change too in the sense of reality where people are spending themselves or spending their lives. Their lives is now increasingly spent online. I was just sharing with someone before that a lot of the young people at church will get together and they'll spend time together, but they'll be on their phones.
Yes. Yep.
And interacting with each other on their phones, it's still being in the same room.
That's what a Gen Z party is now, really. Like, you go along and you watch them sitting in the room on their phones. Sorry to anyone in the room that isn't that bracket. You're now case studies. Just if at any point you want to interject with your own examples, feel free. Are you okay with this so far? Okay, good. All right. I'll check in with you every few minutes. Okay, cool.
There's one of me, I'm a grumpy Gen X.
Yeah. Classic. Yeah. Anybody else?
I think it resonated with me. I know have people in my life who are Gen Z, and it's been conservative alt-right. I blushed that quote, even though it's challenging. Stolen their imagination, and particularly I think for young men, I think what you were saying is so accurate. That they're looking desperately for a place to kind of live out. They want to live out healthy masculinity, that's meaningfully have purpose and be a man.
Yeah.
But it scares me as a sister and as a young woman, then the voices that are feeding into that.
Yep. We're going to actually pick up on both those things for the next section, which is just how much time is being spent on the phone, and then how that's leading to these sort of conversations around masculinity as well, amongst other things. So I think I read research just before the pandemic, which was, on average, young people were spending about 7 hours on the phone for entertainment alone. So that's outside of schoolwork. So just for entertainment, 7 hours a day. Now that was pre-pandemic. Now the research basically indicates that's gone through the roof now. And so for the last couple of years in New Zealand, I was leading a youth group. I thought, I can't just read about young people, I should actually hang out with them as well. And I asked these kids in my youth group, who are around 15, can you send me screenshots for how long you've spent on your phone? And so they did. I just want to show you this. And this is very paradigmatic for the amount of time they spent on it. Now, this is one boy sent me his report for his TikTok usage. So TikTok being one app where you get to see a whole lot of really short videos. And this is just between January and June of last year. So here we go. Just in that 6-month period. He watched a total of 126,981 videos. That's a lot. That equal to 2,476 watching sessions, which equaled 51,800 minutes in his longest, which actually, 36 days, over a month in total on your phone. So what we said about like wasting your life on your phone, you're spending your life, it's 36 days out of 6 months on TikTok, not just on your phone, on TikTok. Which in his longest watching session was over 6 hours in one watching session. I love how TikTok shames you. It makes it a bit hard to... but, I mean, this is not abnormal in the slightest. So then I asked another girl, would you send me your phone usage graphs on your phone? And this is what she sent me. This is a day in the holidays. Spent 10 hours and 40 minutes on her phone on the holidays. And you can see that that isn't actually just standing alone. It's pretty normal as well. So this is a big thing. So yes, what some researchers say about this is that for older generations, we spend a lot of time on our phones as well. Like, that's true. But it's still a secondary reality. We have our normal lives and then we have our phone lives. For Gen Z, you okay, Stuffer? For Gen Z, it's the primary reality. It's the primary place that they do their socialising, all that kind of stuff, the community happening there. And if that's the case, that actually does structure your imagination about the world and life in a completely different way. It has to, right? You go.
Are they on their Bible app, maybe? My church friends. You don't know exactly what they're using that time for.
I'm my sweet summer child. I'd love that to be the case, but you can see here 10 hours on socials alone, 8 minutes for shopping and food, 4 minutes on creativity. I don't know where the Bible app fits in there, but I'd say it definitely doesn't fit in the social. So, yeah, this is what we're up against. Not up against necessarily thought leaders, but algorithms that are keeping us addicted. So we've already mentioned some of the alt-right stuff creeping into the space and the way that we think is being directed by the internet and how that's sort of bleeding into actual culture. You can actually tell that story about how we talk on the left and the right now from recent internet history from about 2007, 2008. So here's recent history, tale of two platforms, Tumblr and 4chan. Who's been on Tumblr? Well, who remembers Tumblr? Okay, I don't know if you want to give a quick description of what it is. You don't? Okay, cool. Yeah, do you want to do it?
No, and I don't want you to show it.
Okay, great, I'll do it. That went really well. Crowd participation, 10
Sure. So essentially, Tumblr was a sharing platform which captured, I guess, millennials significantly, which I think a lot of our lives on. It was basically sharing photos and quotes and anything in between, with just a constant feed of reshares and all sorts of stuff.
Totally. Thank you very much. That's great. So yeah, it was really the first platform which could go viral, and your post could get reposted and reposted again and go viral. There's also a place where fandoms found each other, so big groups of fans for different franchises would find each other, so Harry Potter fans and Twilight fans, remember that? They found each other and they'd share fan art. And it was also a place where you could actually use different identities online, so you could basically pose as a particular person with a particular identity, and that was like a fun thing to do originally. But it didn't take long for those things on Tumblr to change significantly. So it was quite an innocent, fun-loving, fan-based thing. Eventually, that fan art very quickly turned into just fan art porn, and just pornography was everywhere, all over this fan site. Didn't take long as well for the identity stuff to take itself increasingly more seriously. So what you began to feel is, oh, this community is legitimizing the identity that I've chosen, and now I quite like having that identity legitimized in that way. In fact, what's stopping me from doing that all the time? You can actually trace a lot of our lingo and a lot of our academic speech from Tumblr. Words like microaggressions, or white privilege, or problematic, or all this sort of stuff that's used on the left now comes from Twitter, and now it's being used in academic journals and popular culture. It's crazy. And so all these ideas that we now have around what your identity is basically comes from Tumblr. And so this actually represented in the early days the left of the internet. And it was very much female-based. It was very sensitive, which you protected people's identities and upheld how they wanted to be represented, all that kind of stuff. So that was one side of the internet. So this is what it kind of looked like. This feels like ancient internet history now, which is crazy. You got like boys with dark hair and blue eyes, and you have the Bieber thing going across with the hat. You have the Tumblr girl mustache. Then you got all these sassy posts that came up in this era of the internet, like 2007, of like, I'm sorry, I'm not perfect, or I walked out of my last job because the dress code didn't allow snapbacks. And so it was like this sassy era where it's like, yeah, the internet is allowing me to be who I want to be. Now, this is very cringy now, but this was very normal on the internet 15 years ago, so it's quite embarrassing. I don't know if anyone else does Facebook memories, but it gives you memories from years ago. I've kept that on just so I can systematically delete all the cringy stuff. Yeah, I got a nod there, yeah. So this is very much Tumblr, 2007, 2008, around that sort of time, and it really gave us language that led into the rest of culture. So that's the left of the internet. The right of the internet had a very different story. So we go back to our two platforms, and we have Tumblr and we have 4chan. Does anyone know about 4chan? Do you want to talk about this? You do or you don't?
No, you don't.
Okay, great. All right. I keep trying. It's not just me talking. But 4chan, if Tumblr was a hypersensitive, protective environment and very female-based, 4chan was the mirror opposite of all of this sort of stuff. Very male-based, all about transgression, all about offence. And pretty much you can say the most offensive stuff possible, that's the stuff that would get attention. So instead of being image-based, this is mainly just a forum, and you can post images as well. Things that would get the most attention are the things that you're not allowed to say, but I said it anyway because it's cool to be a troll. So this is the stuff, it didn't take long for this to breed the worst stuff imaginable in terms of neo-Nazi thinking, just Nazi thinking, the worst sexist, misogynistic stuff, racist stuff you could possibly imagine came from 4chan. And it was a really powerful cultural force that no one was talking about. It just sort of sat there in the underbelly of the internet until it started bleeding into other areas. And there's a documentary all about how, all this stuff, if you were paying attention to 4chan, it shouldn't have been any surprise, actually, that Donald Trump was voted in, because actually there was this big base that was super critical of the left. Anyway, again, I did some harvesting of things that I could show you. Remember, there's a lot that if I showed you, I would never be invited back. So just to give you a taste of the kind of vibe that sort of grew up on 4chan that has now bled into regular internet usage that would not be a shock to anyone anymore. Found some things that we could possibly discuss in this room, but it's still pretty bad. This would be very normal. I literally just hate liberals. I don't have any other politics. Okay, so this is a long way from civic discourse of a few decades ago. I won't read all of this out because it's disgusting, but I'm not saying there is a superior race, but if there were, other peoples would clamour to live in that race as nations, other women would get to go to great lengths to trade up for men of that race, and men of all other races would lust pathetically after the females of a hypothetical superior race. Pure hypothetical. Disgusting, right? This is literally white supremacist thinking. This sort of stuff would emerge here, like judging people by their race and sex is wrong. I wish you privileged white men would get that. Which meant that the guys on 4chan just made the best memes because they didn't care. They were just like, I'm poking the holes at all your irrationality on the left. And so, this is where it produced all of that stuff. Whatever happened to emos? Where did they go? Well, if your social group is defined by a suicidal nature, don't expect it to last a long time. So really dark and sort of reveling in the darkness of that humour. And then there was a internet platform for young children to meet up online, Habbo Hotel, where they'd all just have little avatars and go around this hotel and talk to each other. These guys on this platform decided I'm going to go into this kids' website and create a swastika with all of us standing there just because we can, because now Hitler's kind of cool now, I guess, because I had some good ideas or something like that. All of that to say is, it's very normal on the internet now to have this super transgressive element running through the humour. Now, I don't know if anybody else's Instagram is doing that, but if you start flicking through Reels now, the amount of videos that get presented to you just making fun of races and people with intellectual disabilities, I don't know if you've seen an uptick in that. It's very normal now. So all of this sort of stuff has just now been integrated into the internet space. And again, I just want to check with Gen Z, none of this will shock you, right?
Yeah, it's so true. And I think now, like, we're seeing cases where it's like bleeding into that everyday language. Now, especially as youth, it's like, well, actually, you can't say that in cursing, because that's going to have consequences. Whereas online, they can say it because they're surrounded with following people that have the same niche thing as them. It's not going to get caught out. And when they say it in real life, it's like, oh, yeah, there are consequences for that.
Totally. Thank you. Feel free to bump in that anytime, because you're a real life example. And all of this, it's important to say that all of this is anonymous, which enables you to do this stuff as a detached listening community, doing whatever you want, no consequence. That's what's for you. You're going to get used to doing that and forget that actually you are connected to other human beings. No. Anyway, so all of that to say is we've got some chaotic conversations to have about a whole bunch of things about being human. Cool, I think we're making good time. I told you it was going to be a fire hose evening. Hopefully this is at least interesting to you and you feel like, we're having this conversation out loud and not putting our heads in the sand about this sort of stuff. We've already mentioned that this is bleeding into conversations around what it means to be a man or what true masculinity is. So I did some harvesting of different videos online to show how this conversation is happening. None of this is satirical, none of it's a parody, this is all real people trying to kind of assert themselves and work out what it means to be a man well. So here you go, here's the first one. Girls and girls again, this is simulating a military boot camp, 11:30 at night, being sprayed with cold hose to try and be like strong or something, because culture's too flaky. We got this one.
So I buy donuts and I sit here and I look at the donuts and I don't eat them. That's how I strengthen my willpower. Do you want the donuts? Because I'm going to throw them away if you don't want them. Okay. I spent 5 minutes in front of these donuts, and over the 5 minutes, I wanted it less and less. So I'm going to take these donuts and I'm going to go throw them in the trash. It was worth, actually I got it for free, but it was worth your money today. I know, got to throw them away. You look at the donuts and then you throw them.
This is like a reinvented stoicism. Exercise my willpower, because that's where my salvation lies, within myself.
Yeah. When you walk into a restaurant, you're probably thinking, what am I going to get to eat? What you should be thinking is, how am I going to buy this restaurant in 5 years? Change your mindset to change your life. Follow me for more tips.
No, to be a man is to be a hustler, to buy a restaurant. Follow me for more tips about being an entrepreneur or something. His voice isn't broken yet, but he's got some good stuff to say. And lastly,
even 44 years old, these are the supplements that I take to get better. This is what I take just in the morning. It consists, first of all, of resveratrol and men. Both of these really extend life. I've got my athletic greens. Every one of these vitamins comes from plants. This is where I'm taking my TRT, my testosterone. I've got a lot of stuff here for my digestive system. This is ion intelligent gut support. Take basically digestive enzymes, probiotics, fiber. That's because I'm eating sometimes 6,000 calories a day because I'm in a huge weight gain zone. There's some mushrooms that I take, ashwagandha.
Just like an absolute like biochemical machine rhinoceros. Like to be a man is to be a peak physicality, you know, like so very interesting ideas about searching for this true manliness. So some of you will be familiar with some of these categories. Right, you got the alpha male thing, which has definitely had a comeback in recent years. You've got to be an alpha, top of the wolf pack. Anyone know what an omega is? No, someone did yesterday. I've forgotten what it is now. Anyway, you got beta. You don't want to be a beta male because that's just serving the alpha, and women don't go for beta apparently. They only go for alpha. And then you have the sigma male, which is someone who's left the system behind and is just going off and doing his own thing. And I don't need the system, leave me alone. So you have all these sort of categories of like what kind of man I am and which one is the most desirable, and it's just this endless searching for what it is to be a true man. And a lot of this has begun to centre around people like Andrew Tate. So, Andrew Tate, I'd say, is a symptom. He's not a cause, but he's definitely not helping in this whole conversation. So he says stuff like this. You can't be responsible for something that doesn't listen to you. You can't be responsible for a dog that doesn't obey you, or a child if it doesn't obey you, or a woman that doesn't obey you. Now, he's, again, seen as one of the loudest, most influential voices in this. Now, I talked about this at a conference in New South Wales last year, and I talked about Andrew Tate, and I said, look, it's not great that someone like him has become, you know, a leading voice in this space for young men. Like, it's a bit of a problem, so we need to have a more complex conversation about what Jesus says to this. And then a woman came up to me at the end of my talk and said, I just checked in with my children, and they told me that Andrew Tate is actually all good, and that you've actually misunderstood him, and actually he's got really good stuff to say. So you better be careful, because what you've just done is defamation in front of 800 people. Now that kind of threw me a bit, if I'm honest. I was like, oh shucks, maybe I did get that wrong. I went and checked it out, and I was like, oh no, I'm totally fine. There's literally a video of him where someone asked him, hey man, how did you rise to prominence? And he was like, oh, well, I had 5 girlfriends at this one time. I pimped 2 of them out online, and through their stuff that they created, he got a whole lot of money. So he was an online pimp for his multiple girlfriends. Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry, but, you know.
And they wanted to teach others to do the same thing.
Yeah, so, yuck.
Yeah,
yuck.
Very yuck.
Yeah, so it doesn't take a lot to say, actually, no, he has a problem. So I feel a bit better about that now. And so I think what we have, and I mean, again, a lot of the stuff will be familiar to a few of you. I made this through an AI engine. This is Jesus versus Zeus. And I think this actually kind of does sum a lot of this conversation up. I think we appeal to, in our quest for order, in which masculinity is part of, we're kind of trying to rediscover our ancient Greek roots, which are like, it's a bit of a myth that we emerged straight from the West, straight from Greece. I mean, you can draw a bit of a line, I guess, but there's been a lot happening in between. But this idea that to be a man is just pure strength and dominance at the top of the food chain, no one tells you what to do, you tell others what to do. So the challenge is, in churches, is to have this really explicit conversation about what Jesus says about what it means to be a man. And that he is a man of power. So he's not just showing us how to be human, but I think what we see there very specifically is this is true manhood. Someone that is incredibly powerful, but he's using it in a certain way. And when we look at Jesus, we see someone who lays down his power constantly for the benefit of those around him and for people who could never repay him. And so what you see in Jesus is this different kind of strength. I think the word in Scripture is way more important than the word instead. It's strength in weakness, not instead of weakness. It's this ability to get out of your own way. And it's this ability, it takes a huge amount of strength to give up what you think you need for someone else. And to say, actually, I feel humiliated in this. So instead of like launching back at you and putting you down, it takes all the strength in the world to say, actually, I do feel humiliated. And what am I going to do out of that? I'm going to choose to show a different way of living, the new way to be human out of that. That's way more strong than just lashing out in retaliation. That's not a conversation that's really happening online. And so this version of masculinity of actually looking hard at Jesus and actually doing the thing where maybe we look at the Gospels and say, with just the lens of the question of what kind of man is a true man because of what we see in Jesus is a really, really important one. So I feel like that's probably a priority for a lot of institutions. It's great that there are so many men in this room, I think, because you guys are in this position to actually demonstrate this sort of thing. And if you're a teacher or if you're a youth leader, there are times where things are going to happen where you're going to feel humiliated or someone's going to challenge you or you're going to be put into a situation where you're questioned. What you do in that moment is probably more important than a whole bunch of content you've ever put together for sermons. Because what they're watching is what's going to be demonstrated in that moment. What kind of power are you about to exercise? And what you do will be stick with them more than you realise. So you guys are very, very important. Not saying that women don't, but for these conversations, obviously, it's, this is what we're getting at. I don't know if anyone wants to jump in with it. I feel like I've just talked for ages now. So anyone want to jump in with any thoughts?
Just if anyone wants to think about this, I don't know if there's a John Tyson. He's a pastor in New York, but
he's an Adelaide boy.
Yeah, he's locally like. Is he? Oh, so love it. But he's releasing a podcast at the moment. It's called the Forming Men podcast, with I think it's Jackson Bethany.
Yeah.
So doing a lot of really cool work in this space, and obviously he's operating in the American context, which I feel like is a bit of a hotbed right now for these conversations around this. But yeah, I mean, I've been listening to them and they really helped me in my work. So
that's good because he's the theology of manhood, isn't he? So it's not just it's good.
It's really robust.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Yes.
Has anyone seen a recent episode of Gruen Transfer, The Pitch, where they show a teeny tiny ad where two kids say, "Hey, let's play mum and dad"? Incredibly confronting because they quickly pick up pretend phones and watch their neighbours and just look at their phones, and it's quite confronting the way this is pitched at helping mums and dads realise that their kids are watching every move they make on their phones, and as they're playing mums and dads pretending to be on their phones, their parents walk in at the end of the ad on their phones, and incredible.
What ad is this, sorry?
Have you had Gruen Transfer? Oh, this is why you have to, look up ABC iView. I'll tell you later.
Okay, yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Anybody else?
It's interesting you talk about the moment there, with young people and Watkins and face-to-face in real life, because I think really at the heart of every human, is the need for, if you just said, you can say, we're still dealing with the same thing.
Yes.
You can do what you want on the internet, but people still want authenticity.
That's right.
Yeah.
The thing with authenticity is it's one of those tricky words because I feel like it's the only virtue left.
Yeah.
So like we don't want to talk about external virtues like honour and all that kind of stuff. It's like what's worth hanging my life on? I need to be authentic. But it's authenticity that's now been divorced from any true moral horizons of what I should aim my life at. And so being a community where you're authentically going after meaningful stuff, super amazing in today's world. So
something about authenticity in face-to-face too, you see the full context, whereas these sorts of things, you don't know what context sometimes, and people are so divorced from reality.
Totally.
Yeah. Piggyback on that.
Yeah.
How do we help when their first reality isn't what we're talking about here? So we're talking about like face-to-face, being able to have these conversations, being able to actually help them lift their eyes to actually see true reality and actually have conversations. But as you point out, that's not their world. Should we be engaging in that, or are we, what's the role in terms of engaging where they are and calling them something better?
Yeah, any thoughts in the room of things that are working in your own contexts in that space? Like, because we've got this, they've been discipled through their phones, of which they're on most of the time. What's working in your context that you're saying?
I think you have to be prepared to not be liked by your children. To actually be their father or their mother, not their friend.
Yes.
and establish boundaries really early on, because their breaches of age with this stuff, the horse bobbed us. Yep. That's it, mate.
That's been the same through the ages, though, hasn't it? Just at a different level.
Has anyone experienced any success around this? There's some good engagement going on in this space?
Yeah. I am an outdoor educator, and so when I go on CAD, the requirement is to not bring that photo. And so it's amazing being able to see them have face-to-face conversations, and then other kids like, I'm going to make it requirement, or I'm going to do this when I get home, and limit the time I have on my phone and all that. So yeah, I think outdoor camps and that sort of area, I think, is helping, and like it's becoming more popular, going outdoor camps and that. Yeah.
That's good. So having this opportunity to actually experience life without that, of course. Yeah. I think there's some schools in New Zealand in which phones have been made in up to 2 weeks. The kids are like, don't ever let us go back to that. It's so much better not having it. So there is something to be said for a hard, cold turkey thing, but that's obviously very difficult. And
I said it the other day in our PD, but just for everyone else, I've noticed the trend towards rhythm is coming back. So there's like read I saw where this person talked about, what if we had a day once a week where we just kind of disconnected and we got away, and it's kind of ancient wisdom that's been around for millennia is starting to come back in vogue. And I think there's a value in rhythms for younger people where they can learn that, and also talk about meaning. Yeah, being able to give them that structure to be able to go, this is the day without my phone, these are times put my phone in bed, all those eights.
It's amazing. I think what I said the other day too was like we run so far from Christianity, we circle back around and discover the Sabbath. So yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah. Anything else that's working in the room? Were you going to say something?
All I was going to say is, with my kids growing up, when we used to watch shows, when the adverts would come on, we'd always play a game called Truth or Lie.
Oh yeah.
And so we'd depict all the sort of the adverts and go, what are they trying to say? What are they doing? Are they being truthful? Are they being dishonest? And that was a game we did for years. And that helped my kids understand that, hang on, they're actually just trying to sell me something. They're not actually trying to instill wisdom to me. And so that just gave my kids a better understanding of the world that we live in. So in regards to phones and stuff like that, just sit with your kids and actually go through stuff and go, what are they saying? What are they doing?
That's right.
Cool. Yeah.
Bye. Quick question. Is there still in New Zealand schools a subject called digital citizenship?
Yes.
Yeah, so 10 years ago I was teaching at Auckland Christian College in Auckland,
okay. Yep.
And I was so impressed with what I saw in the classroom at the tender age of just year 1, year 2, once a week, maybe twice, to have that digital citizenship conversations, and plus a good old Bible class. It was called Bible time when we had Christian studies, and it was just so rich and all about what God says. So I'm just curious to know, with teachers in the room here, for example, are we still having those
I can speak
conversations?
So my child's just started here in reception, and she came home at the end of last term doing digital citizenship.
Great.
So she's in reception, starting that early on, just the basics around what does it mean to be responsible with technology and living in that world. So yes, good answer. Sounds like a sales pitch for the school, I swear it's not.
But no other school around here is doing it. I would just answer the question from my experience. So when I was running the youth group, what I discovered very quickly, and I'm sure this is reminiscent of a lot of people in the room, is I couldn't draw on very much from my own youth group experience because the world changed so much. Because I used to be like, as long as I turn to youth group, we might read a little bit of the Bible, tell me God loves me, sing a worship song, tell me to behave myself, play chubby buddies, and I was probably but I find that these kids, because they're plugged into so much that's going on, it's like they've got all these political ideas already, they've been loaded up with ideological ideas, they come ready to go with these conversations. And we have to kind of meet them where they are. So I found, the reason why I'm having this conversation out loud tonight is because I think we actually need to have these conversations about this stuff with them, and then be like, how does Jesus actually speak to this conversation about masculinity? Instead of being like, here's my regular life on the internet, it has nothing to say to the gospel. And then I do my church stuff over here, which we were talking about having faith and trusting God, and I don't really know how they bring together. And actually, we actually be the ones to actually bring them completely together and be like, that's what Jesus has to say about your internet usage. And do you realize that the Bible is speaking to exactly these things? Interesting that Stoicism and Greek ideas about being man are starting to rise up, and ideas around sexuality and dominance are rising up again. This is Paul's will. Suddenly the New Testament is very relevant because he's up against all the same things we are. So my encouragement would be, talk about the stuff out loud. Don't have it as a side conversation. Just be like, I know what you're watching. I know what you're thinking. Let's talk about it. And let's actually wrestle with these ideas out loud. I found when I've done it, that was the best youth group experiences I had, because they're like, oh, finally we can actually talk about this with an adult, you know. That would just be my 2 cents. Anyway, we'll just move on for now. What's the time? I just want to kind of take up too much of your radio. It's 8. Okay, well, I'll try and wrap up this next bit as fast as possible. Won't spend too much time on this, but parasocial relationships emerge, which is people are now developing quite deep relationships with people they'll never meet. For instance, Taylor Swift. So they'll know, we laugh about it being a Swiftie, but they'll know all of her lyrics and what every lyric is, directed to a particular celebrity she dated. You'll know everything about her. You'll feel a huge amount of emotional investment in a person that will never ever know your name. And that is another way which is directing how we sort of understand relationships. And that's directed by some of these platforms as well. Twitch is a platform in which you are basically casting yourself, or you're videoing yourself and showing this to a whole bunch of people. Maybe you're playing a video game, you're doing other activities, and the whole load of people are talking to you, but then you're talking to the masses. It's parasocial, it's very one way. Twitter's a little bit like that. Then you have OnlyFans, which is a website for exclusive content. Again, did not take very long for this website to be known pretty much solely for porn. And so the way this kind of works is Instagram, being a picture-heavy app, has become basically a shop window for OnlyFans, where you might see a girl's profile, you have a link, you click on the link, it'll take you to an OnlyFans page. And if you pay $5 a month or something, you get to see all her exclusive content, in which she is basically earning a whole lot of money for a whole bunch of men all over the world who want to see her naked. So this is where we're kind of heading, and this is, again, is not news to anyone who's been on the internet in the last 4 years. And it's become a very legitimate economic option for young women especially. And it's seen in economic terms, not in moral terms, which is kind of crazy. I'll just skip some of this. What I really want to get to and land on is this, really. And this is, I'm drawing this from a thinker called Gia Tolentino, who's a writer for the New York Times. She basically says, because social media is their primary nature, we're talking about Gen Z, these are the 5 things it tends to do to our imaginations, which I think the gospel needs to speak to really clearly. First thing is it distends our sense of identity. So distends is a fancy way of saying extend or expand. It distends our sense of identity. It basically promotes this idea that what you do and your performance as a human being is way more important than it actually is real. Now you take young people who are already quite self-conscious, like things I do, people are watching, I better not mess up because there'll be so embarrassing, my life will be over. You plant that into social media, that just gets exploded where you feel like I cannot mess up at all because everybody's watching. Social media distends your sense of identity. So that's the first way in which it's actually structuring our imagination. So we're not even talking about addiction at this stage. We're saying, if you are online, this is what you're being taught the whole time. And you'll notice that for younger people, like millennials might still post every now and then on their Instagrams. Young people aren't really posting anything at all. If they do, it's like once or twice a year, because they understand the risk involved in that, because everybody's watching. Now, obviously, that's huge generalizations here, but that's kind of what's happening there. Second thing, again, not rocket science here, is it maximizes opposition. So it basically teaches you to think about the people on the other side of the ideological spectrum as idiots, or even worse, sometimes non-human. I can say whatever I want about them because they're the reason that there are problems in the world. So from the left, everyone on the right is a Nazi, If you're on the right, everyone on the left is woke and destroying all the social fabric of the world. And there's no in between, and in fact the algorithms love you kicking off against each other because that brings more attention through their platforms. So it maximizes opposition. Thirdly, it teaches us to overvalue our opinions because I get to decide what's the most, the authority resides in me, and I'm going to get likes and validation based on what I say. So it teaches us to overvalue our own opinions because also we're selecting the people that we listen to. We're not having to listen to an authority figure in the same way. It cheapens our sense of solidarity. So back in the day, if you wanted to exercise solidarity with someone, you'd literally do life alongside them. You might make them a meal. You might invite their family to come and hang out with your family. You'd do life alongside them. You'd actually show up to places with them and be part of your community. Solidarity meant something. Now, solidarity might mean post a black square on your Instagram or post something in support of something, or actually sometimes it just means don't support something by not posting something. Solidarity can just be narrowed to virtue signaling. It's like, I'll show you which group I'm part of, and it's all it's to do. So it doesn't mean what it used to mean. And lastly, it destroys our sense of scale. So we have no idea how big some crises are and how big others are. And part of what growing up is sort of understanding how big certain issues are compared to other things. So, when you're growing up, some issues feel like beach balls, and actually everything feels like a beach ball, and they're all really big problems. What adults are there to do most of the time is say, yeah, that's a beach ball-sized problem. That's actually a basketball-sized problem. That's a marble, don't worry about that one. That's a golf ball, you get the idea. It actually tries to give you a sense of how big everything is and the scale of things and what you can address. And showing you that you don't need to take on responsibility for too many things, but there are some things that are important. What the internet does is it just doesn't give you any idea about the scale of any of these things. And if you've ever been on something like Reddit, you'll understand what that's like. You can see a video where you watch a cute cat video, then you'll see a trailer for a movie coming up. Swipe again, you'll see a scene of the Russia and Ukraine war, and you'll watch 3 Russian soldiers getting torn to pieces in a shell attack. Then you swipe again, you see someone talking about gender and how they're being oppressed. The next one, you swipe again about how corporations had to say sorry for something that they've done, now they're being cancelled. Swipe again, another funny cat video. What? That's chaos. And I've got no idea how to decide which bits I should give my attention to. Which bits are the real problems that I can address in the world, and how do I give attention to it? The internet's not going to help you out there. You need adults in the mix being like, oh no, this is the sense of scale that brings. So all that to say is, if these are 5 things that kind of, I think, speak to how it's forming imaginations in a kind of a nice, concise way, the gospel speaks to all these 5 things too. And if we can get these right, I think we'll be doing really effective counter formation, because we want to actually speak into this stuff well. So if the internet is teaching us to distend our identity, that we are super important, what the gospel says is actually your identity rests in Christ. And so that isn't just a theological phrase, a pat on the head, like you're in Christ. What it means is your entire foundation of your being is not about you. That no matter what you experience in your life, no matter what tragedies, no matter what embarrassments or humiliations or successes, doesn't matter. You are in Christ, and that is what defines you. And what that means is communities hold this, and they don't lift others up based on those things or push them down. What they say is we're all here muddling along together, trying to think alongside Jesus as we do that, and try to demonstrate that the best we can. The church actually needs to understand that we've got an answer to this. It's not all on you anymore. Relax. Actually, this is a place where you don't have to perform. That's not about performance, it's about you waking up to truths that are true about you all the time. You're not going to disappoint God, there's nothing that will shock him. But what you can do is become more human by realising that your identity is not the most important thing about you. It's you. Now that's actually quite a controversial thing to say in a society in which your identity is the most important part about you. But anyway, I'll leave you to do the work yourself. Maximizes opposition. I mean, Jesus had disciples who were zealots and tax collectors, literally the left and the right, who wanted to literally kill each other. You got like a basically a guerrilla terrorist who wanted to take out the foreign oppressive power, and then you got someone on the other side working for them. And they were in the same disciple band. So can zealots sit at tables for tax collectors? They must. We're the only place on earth that really seems to have that conviction that the bipolar political spectrum is not the most important thing about you. What that means is we are all just as needy when we come to the table of communion. And actually that's what defines us. And so what I want to suggest is our schools and our churches should be, basically if you disagree with someone on the internet, and today that's the end of the relationship, end of community. So yeah, you go and exist over there with your whole lot of people that have got things wrong, and I'll be over here with my group. What if our young people were taught in our communities that the disagreement is the beginning of the relationship? What we do from that moment is learn how to hold on to each other, because no one else will teach how to do that. And so our cohorts coming through, what we offer to the world to build this culture of erosion and fracturing is, we've got a whole lot of people now who know how to stay in relationship with people they have massive issues with. They know how to love them, and actually work for their benefit, and they're completely for them, even if they might profoundly disagree. Do you know what I'm saying? This is not, it's very simple stuff, but incredibly radical when you realise the waters we're swimming in at the moment. It's rediscovering that stuff. It teaches us to overvalue our opinions. We need to find ways of talking about submission to Christ, because I think part of the problem with a lot of worship songs, if I can overstep the mark a little bit, is that they're very therapeutic. It's like, Jesus, bring me peace. It's like, man, you live a pretty good life if you're here. Jesus will bring you peace. God does want you to be at peace, for sure. Finding that deep peace. He's a comfort, but he's also a confrontation. He will also go after you and find those things that are stopping you from being completely human. And the Spirit will want to direct you into ways of actually thinking logically of, like, if Christ is the center of gravity of all reality, we want to be in alignment with that. So actually, what we learn about ourselves is we think a lot of things throughout our lives, and we learn that we didn't know as much as we used to. And with older generations, we learned that they've made lots of mistakes. I don't need to take my opinions as seriously as I think I do. Actually, I can relax and I'm just a kid. The internet will tell me I need to be really strong and opinionated about all these things happening all over the world. I'm just a kid, and I got people I can lean on for that, who are demonstrating Christ to me by being, just like Andrew Tate has been for some people and Jordan Peterson. These real people in my lives are places of stability in the storms of life. I can relax. It's the offering of the church. It cheapens our sense of solidarity. I mean, this isn't a big one. This is a lot of the New Testament. Love one another. Carry one another's burdens. Like, this is real solidarity. We don't just post something in solidarity with someone. We really get alongside them. And sacrificial love means turning up and picking someone up and taking them to church when they don't have a car. And it's doing stuff for them practically to show you're actually willing to go beyond just lip service and say, actually, this is really important stuff. The little things are the big things. And lastly, it destroys our sense of scale. I think I got to a bit of a ramble or a rant yesterday to talk about this, is that there are some big things and some small things. I think what the New Testament seems to be saying again and again and again, the biggest thing that ever happened in human history was the death and resurrection of Jesus. So yes, there are big things happening around the world, there are big things happening in your life, but do you realize that God coming as a human being, stepping into death and then breaking death, doesn't get bigger than that? If we can orient all our ideas about how big the issues are in the world by nothing that's bigger than that, hope starts to get cast in a very different way. So you can hope properly, because I can look at the despair and the pain and the suffering in the world of things that shouldn't be happening, and I can feel all that grief, but I don't have to be consumed by it. I can grieve, but as Paul says, I don't grieve like the unbelievers. I grieve in a different way because I have hope. Where I can say the most important thing in terms of scale happened when God entered into the human story and did those things. Now I can orient everything else in relation to those things. Actually, that's what good preaching is, right? It's orienting people to a sense of scale. So if we can hold these things in our minds as we're doing this, what we're actually doing is remapping reality for our young people. And I don't think it's never been this complex because we haven't had this type of technology and connectivity in human history. But what this does, it makes me really excited, and it shouldn't, because I've talked about a lot of bad news this evening, but I just think the people in this room are going to have stories that we're going to tell in years to come of people who figured stuff out by working together and staying in community and doing the hard yards and just showing up faithfully for young people in times of need, being those real human beings, interacting and stepping out of the detached primary nature of the internet into the secondary one and actually doing something really meaningful here. So I think it's so great that we've got people in this room wanting to talk about this stuff, and thank you very much for listening to me. I wondered if we've got a little bit of time for 8:30, not much, but maybe we could grab something to eat and drink, and then I don't know, we want to get together in for a few minutes and just chat about some of this stuff. Is that right? Maybe for another 15 minutes or something. Yeah. Cool. So we got some water and some chockies and drinks. So we'll do that in 5 minutes if you want to grab yourself some stuff. We can chat after.
Growing up, like obviously we had it, but it wasn't all we knew. And it was there, but then we were discussing how once it became like the quick scroll stuff, like all the really short videos, one, we lose our attention span, and two, that's when you get stuck because you're just constantly scrolling. And we see it like in our youth ministries. You see that they're now stuck in it because they grew up with the quick scroll, whereas we didn't grow up with the quick scroll. And we were able to recognize that we're getting stuck in the quick scroll. And now that we're kind of, like, I guess you could say, have we gotten sick of the quick scroll? Because we realize what it's doing to us. Like we were discussing that we were able to recognize it, and we're trying to cut back on it. And we put processes in place to slow ourselves down from being so easily accessible into the quick scroll. But then we were also just discussing again, you can't just drop a habit and then just expect to like sit there and then just stare at the wall. Like you need to replace it with something. Yes. How can you encourage like kids, youth to replace it with something that will stimulate their brain?
I think, honestly, I think you guys will end up leading this. It won't be older generations, it'll be you guys that are wrestling with it, will be the ones to actually come up with the ideas. What I want to say is encourage you, like, think of yourself as leaders and listening, not as like the young people waiting for everyone else to do it. You're probably going to come up with the best ideas. So that's really cool. And then tell the rest of us what you do and what works, because that's how it works. Like, older generations have lots to tell you, and we need to learn how to listen to them. But also, like, you have a lot to give in terms of like how to actually interact with what's going on and all the incremental little changes. So don't think of yourself as having less to offer. I think you just got a different role. It's really, really good work. What else is happening?
It's interesting to talk about the BS factor over here. I often think about, you talk about algorithms and AI and all that sort of stuff, and that deals with the brain, but at the end of the day, we are spirit beings, and internet, whatever, can't replicate that. You know, the Bible talks about the seeing of the spirit survives sort of thing, and that's where the internet can't replace it.
No, exactly right. So I think that's, you go to the meta crisis, that was the spiritual part, purpose, things like that. That's the hole that's been dug, waiting for something to come into it. So I mean, a lot of research has shown that young people, when they lose their faith, sometimes they don't become atheists. They just like read evolution books. Actually, what they do is they become spiritual. So they become post-Christian, ex-evangelical spiritualists. They go to yoga studios and do mindfulness and things like that because they're still trying to find those experiences. So I think what's happened is the church has become very cerebral. Like, we do 40-minute sermons, and like it's the mind that's most important. Not having a go, I've got to be careful what I say here. But all of that to say is like the aesthetic is really important as well. Like, using art to help you get things that language can't quite say. Music is really important. Experience is really important. Spirit, leaving room for the spirit to experience the spirit's really important too. So I know there'll be different convictions about that in the room too, but all that to affirm what you're saying is we're more than just what goes up on between our ears. So we need to start rediscovering some of that stuff that the West has kind of narrowed down to information. There's a writer called James K. Smith, I'm sure a lot of people in the room have heard, like Desiring the Kingdom, that book. He talks about, when you try to encourage young people to, be responsible with their sexuality, you often say, as long as they fill them with all the right information, they won't do anything bad. It's like, what he says, basically what that is you're pouring water on their heads to put out fire in their heart. What we actually need to do is work in a level of desire, and you do that through the body and through aesthetics and stuff like that. So rediscovering the non-cerebral elements of church and faith as well. So, yeah. Anything else in the room?
I was wondering, how much is it a first world problem? Probably talk about here. How much is it penetrated into the developing countries, just in your recent?
I'm really glad you asked that question. This is a very Western thing. So this is very much North America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, UK, maybe a couple of others as well. In terms of the rest of the world, very, very different, I'd say. I'd say the rest of the world have different epistemologies, so they have different ways of knowing, of getting at truth. The West has a tradition that's starting to falter and see the limits of it. But if you have a much more embedded spirituality within your culture, it's not the same. Much more physical culture, it's not the same. So yeah, my research and my thesis was all about the West, of which obviously Australia is a part. But yeah, this doesn't represent the rest of the world at all. And we have a lot to learn from other cultures that have different ways of approaching faith. So yeah.
But also have deep community friendly connections too, where
Yeah.
culture is. We're much more isolating, independent after.
That's right.
Things show that Australia and Aussies and Americans are the most isolated with the people.
Well, that does something to your spirituality too, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, if you take a really strict biblical, like systematic theological approach about what a human is, you really do say, like, there's no such thing as an autonomous individual.
Yeah.
That's something that emerged from Western thinking.
Yeah.
Actually, we're deeply resonating and reciprocal. You are your community. You are the people that made you. There's nothing about you that is solely what you've decided to be. The way you think comes from your parents. The words you use comes from your culture. The way you laugh comes from like your bloodlines, like the things you find funny is in your community. Like there's nothing that's just been you. I've decided to be like that. You are your community. And we need to rediscover that. The West is caught itself into thinking that we're autonomous agents.
Yeah.
It's a myth.
Yeah.
The general resources, these often have been used towards class essentials.
How about?
And a couple of different topics look at screen time, and like what is it for each human, so looking at that, how important it is to kind of be ourselves and not just be opinions and things like that. I think it's mainly geared towards people with great interested in Christianity, but like Christian kids just down already. So
cool.
Great. Easy. Business. So I actually, I've been gone for a while, but I've been mentoring a couple of fellas, and I was, initially I was a bit and been mentoring the mechanics, so like they had this old car there, so I've been girls there, and trade up the scouts have got them out, and just gone. But that's what I found amazing through it all. I was like, when I initially started doing it, I was really concerned how do I interact with these young fellas, 14, 15, and everything's about technology and things like that. But it really broke through to me as time has gone on with them, how important to notice that what they're seeking is actually a relationship with me. That made me realise how much they were seeking absolutely. And the amazing thing, I even said to me, they said we could watch so many YouTube videos and different things on how to do this, and he said, it's just so great just being with someone, talking about it to us directly, and seeing where we're at. Well, and they pick you up where we're at, and I just thought to myself, wow, so through that I've actually learned that, I would say, I was worried about the technology and the barrier that could have caused our relationship. I mean, I was worried about something that wasn't even, they were seeking a relationship over the technology, so it's just sort of share that. It's
amazing. What you're doing is like hugely significant.
I was just going to ask that, have you seen anything you've talked about tonight?
Have you seen any of that come in with the church and start to influence the true church? Like the idea of a church contextualizing so that they start going to 5-second sermons, that kind of thing. Like that's ironic, but I'm trying to say.
Well,
or is there a danger?
I don't really jump around and look at different churches to be able to decide that, yes. So I think critique is the one of that, which I can do. I think, like we mentioned, the therapeutic stuff. So yeah, I think there's a lot of therapeutic Christianity, which is simply designed to help you feel good on the inside, which is a part of it for sure, but not all of it. I think what we're seeing through a lot of the meaning crisis and looking for these solid places to stand, people actually do want to be challenged because the challenge reveals that there's something meaningful underneath it. So I think my hunch would be like to say something meaningful as making it really explicit around what this actually leads us to be like. The political realm was really a big one there, and a lot of churches rightfully are trying to stay away from that because they don't want division, but maybe a way of talking about politics is in spite of these things that do divide us, what kind of community do we want to be? So I'm not picking a side. I'm saying if you do pick a side, it's still no excuse to treat someone on the other side to be like, make it ridiculous. I don't know. I don't think that answers your question.
No, but it's, yeah.
Cool. Sweet.
Well, can we thank Session? Our main point for tonight was to be able to sort of provide an equipping and a blessing upon you and church leaders, next generation leaders as well, in working with our young people, because it's a Christian school. We have our role and we partner with our churches and our parents and primary educators, our kids, and the important messages that Sam's brought to us tonight. In particular, I love what you said about having the responsibility to bring that as a challenge for us to think about what are the opportunities in this. It can seem like a lot of despair, but what is that true hope? And I think there's beautiful opportunities that come out of that. And you talk about swimming in these cultural waters, and I just think we live out of a better story, and what's our responsibility to work with our young people to say, this is a better story. God's story is that better story. So thank you for challenging us. Thank you as we work to keep that being countercultural and raising up our next youth to be culture cultivators in themselves. So thank you for what you've challenged us with tonight and get us to think deeply about. And my hope and prayer is that you'll be able to take that back to your church teams and be able to broaden that conversation as you continue to be equipped in that space. So bless you all for being here. I'm going to ask you to pray for you all before we finish up. Thanks.
Cool, yeah.